I'm Philippa Milnes Smith from Lucas Alexander Whitley. We're quite a wide-ranging literary agency in terms of the people we represent. So, for instance, we represent Nigel Slater in cookery, Sophie Kinsella, best-selling YA and adult women's fiction writer, John Simpson, Jeremy Bowen, if you're looking at the sort of political journalists, and then I represent Philip Reeve, fantasy, whose Mortal Engine series is going to be made into a film by Peter Jackson. That's our exciting news last week. I represent Chris Riddell, who's the Children's Laureate, and he's both a writer and illustrator. And for me, one of the exciting things happening, I think, is that illustrated text, not just text, but that kind of use of word and pictures for a broader audience, not just young children and picture books, but for older kids, and I think more for adults, is coming in, and I think that's changing some of the texture of narrative. So there are, I think, quite a lot of interesting things happening in book publishing from that point of view. You're very lucky if you can both write and illustrate, and I think it gives you a particular way of creating a book. But yes, sometimes, you have good partnerships between people. Philip Reeve actually and Sarah McIntyre is a very dynamic pairing of very different talents in some ways. And those have worked in the UK, they've worked very well internationally. And I think it's probably important to say that we're always looking for things that we hope are going to be really successful here, but also are going to sell in other languages, are going to sell around the world, may become great stage plays, may become great films, television, and we're very active in that area. So storytelling crosses many different media, I think. I think with the manuscript, it's often about voice. When you start, and often when you go back and read some of the kind of great classics, a lot of the time it's that first sentence, that first paragraph can be really arresting. And an individual voice, a unique voice that comes across, but really it's a kind of something that comes out of a book almost that grabs you and says you've got to read on, you've got to find out what's going to happen. So certainly looking for voice, looking for interesting ideas, interesting concepts, characters that you find completely irresistible, and that can be for many kind of different reasons. I like people who are experimenting a little sometimes with text, doing something slightly different, and we're looking for things that on some levels may be kind of commercial genre, crime, continues from strength to strength, women's romance, if it's something different, something quite new, psychological thrillers people have been talking about for the last couple of years, they don't show any sign of abating. And then we're always thinking, what is next? What is different and what's new? And you know it when you see it. It's not always easy to describe. So I'm looking for the thing I haven't thought about a lot of the time. I think the first thing I would say is that I've been really impressed with the quality of the pitching and the projects people are talking about and the commitment they've already put in both the sort of the writing, thinking about their work in some cases, thinking further outside that about what is it like to be an author, will I have to think about social media? And they've obviously responded to what's been in the conference so far. So I think that's good. People talking certainly about fantasy, and we've been talking in terms of their pitching about how do you present a fantasy world when you're talking to someone, they've not been there, they've not spent their heads and imaginations not been in that world. How do you get that across? How do you kind of think about that? So I think that's been a kind of useful thing. Getting people to not forget the basics of, so how long is your book? Who is it for? So some of the simpler things. And making them talk a bit about themselves, sometimes in relation to their work. Why have you chosen to write about this when it's something maybe with a more realistic base? Do you have a relationship with this sort of material? So getting people to think about themselves as the writer and their relationship with their work. There are obviously two things. There's one, if you're doing a verbal pitch, you've got to kind of paint a word picture for them, and you've got to be able to do that quite quickly. So I think it's often a test of whether someone really can see their own fantasy world 360 degrees. And certainly in kind of pitches I get and manuscripts I get at work, I spend a lot of time just finding holes in things, or sort of, I can't really see that, or that's really inconsistent, or I'm not clear, are we on this planet, we're on another planet, we're on the moon, we're in the past, we're in the future. So it's not an easy thing to do, and I think the thing is you want them to get across in their voice. It's not like tick these boxes and then I'll get what you're talking about. And again, with the great fantasy novels, read the opening and you'll know whether you're there. You know, whether you're in kind of, you know, where it's Narnia or whether it's George R.R. Martin or whatever, or Terry Pratchett. Different textures, different places.